the meeting is called to order. It is 3:57.
I would have run to the bathroom.
Okay, never mind.
Because I might.
Ernest, can I talk to you?
What? Do you need something? Send my name over there. Just being Are you going to do a motion for the meeting? Okay. I'll tell him to. Okay. Laura, come in peace. I'm not feeling great. Do my best. That's right. They are bright.
Oh yeah, this is so bright.
Bethany, are these new night lights?
I'm not gonna lie, I've never looked up before.
They're very bright.
I don't think so.
They feel.
I think there's new light bulbs. I think there's new, yes. Thank you, Encore.
I've never looked, I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea. Are we brighter than normal? Are we? Yeah? Oh, then maybe they are new. I've never noticed.
Oh, much better. Thank you.
Now the TV guy.
Sorry. Do you need a mod? I didn't do it. Oh.
Okay, everybody, it now is 4 o'clock. This meeting is called to order. Instead of me calling everybody's names, can we just do roll call from now on and say your name, starting with Ms. Griffin?
Yeah, Sparta Griffin here.
Kelly Bigley here.
Kevin Kraus.
Corey O'Connor.
Sarah Namarato.
Susan Ivashevic.
Rob Perkins.
Bethany Hallam here.
Manny.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to move straight to public comment on board actions and motions because we anticipate that we are going to have a motion to bypass community corrections reports this evening in the interest of time. So if you object to that and you want to speak to that, then please feel free to incorporate that into your comments. That's passages to recovery, the renewal center, and electronic monitoring. So there were two. Okay, 2 people signed up online, and I'm not sure if you want to speak on board actions or if you want to just speak generally, so I'm going to call your name. If you want to speak on something that this board is voting on, then please come forward now. If you do not, then you will speak at the second public comment section. Randy Kovac. Not here. Kayana Proctor. Todd McCullum.
I can wait, Judge. Wait till Judge.
Okay. Muhammad Ali.
I can also wait until then.
Okay. John Kostenowitz.
General.
Sam Schmidt.
I guess general.
Sharon Bonavoglia.
Judge Bethany thinks that people might not understand.
Yeah. All right, I'll tell him again.
The Pennsylvania Interfaith Impact Network is encouraged by Mr. Wingard's verbal commitment to work with the community groups to improve the lives of the residents of the ACJ. We are hopeful and committed to hold him accountable to those words, and therefore are looking forward to productive meetings with us and all of the organizations who have banded together for the sake of our neighbors in the jail. Those neighbors have been receiving $125 back from their own and their loved ones' money from the exorbitant cost of phone calls and commissary and perhaps even tablet fees. We strongly support the continuation of that payment. It is one of the few acts of justice they receive in a timely fashion. We do hope that the cost of phone calls will go down drastically in June, but that should not end these payments. At most, please carefully do the math and adjust those payments only if entirely necessary. I also want to make it clear that I will continue to read the names of those who have died under the care of the Allegheny County Jail Oversight Board since 2022, as it remains essential to consider their lives and the lives of their loved ones as you do the work required to care for those still housed in the jail. So please rise for the reading of the names of the dead. Richard Lenhart, Robert Blake. You want to come stand with me? There. Okay. Cody Still. Daniel Pastoric. John Brady. Martin Buchek. Robert Harper. Vinkley Harris. Justin Brady. Paul Allen. Roger Millspaugh. Paul Spisak. Gerald Thomas. Jerry Lee Ross, Jr. Victor Joseph Zelenek. Ronald Andrus. Anthony Tallada. William Spencer. James Washington. Damon Leroy Kays. Tim Menino. Douglas Bonamo. Zachary Som. Nicole Barufi. Richard Shuba II. Terrence Clowney. Tracy Hickey. Sharon Bonavolia for PIN, and proudly standing with a wonderful woman. Thank you, Mr.
To those of you who said that you would wait until the end of the meeting to comment, I just...
There are 3 who are in their 20s, were in their 20s.
Thank you. To those of you who said you wanted to wait till the end, I just want to make sure that you understand that we are voting on the warden tonight. So if you want to talk about that, you should, in the payments, the IWF payments. So if you want to speak on those issues, you should not waive your time.
So can you re-ask those?
Okay, so Todd McCollum, do you want to speak now?
I I can wait, Judge.
Thank you. Muhammad Ali.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin with a definition, if that's okay. The process by which individuals are forced to do compulsory labor with their residence and location of work dictated by the party that holds them in bondage. What word do you think best relates to this definition?
Slavery.
Now, I'd like if you could imagine being locked in a cage, unable to leave, unable to participate in society, separated from your loved ones. You work but are not paid a living wage, and your only connection to the outside world is through letters that are screened, calls that are monitored, cameras watching your every move. Your environment is thoroughly controlled to ensure you spend your days stressed, hungry, and sick. The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution states, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." Tonight, I'd like to talk about the votes regarding the $125 monthly allowance given to the people within the ACJ, an amount that is wholly and entirely insufficient for the sustenance of human life, but is better than absolutely nothing. I would like to thank the members of this board who voted in favor of the $125 payment the last time this issue was voted on. However minuscule, these payments provide a critical buffer for individuals who are otherwise entirely dependent on their families on the outside for sustenance. We have to remember that every human being, whether incarcerated or not, is bound to others through a complex social web, a web that is strained and under constant tension due to the stresses of living under the capitalist system. Every dollar given to an incarcerated person is an act against dehumanization, against the foundations of white supremacy and racism that built this country, and a commitment to the well-being of the people of this county. Any belief that giving the individuals incarcerated within the ACJ this critical stipend somehow takes away from the functioning of the county government and from the people of the county overall is infantile. By continuing to pay incarcerated individuals, this board will show its commitment to both the social and economic health of their constituents, the people incarcerated within the ACJ, and to their families. If we believe that human lives are inherently valuable and that all human beings deserve to live in dignity, that human communities must live in dignity, then we must aggressively pursue all attempts at building through ways to prevent the dehumanization of the carceral system. I ask the board to make the right call and to vote in favor of the $125. The people of this county are watching. Thank you.
Thank you. John Kostenowitz, do you want to speak?
I think what I have to say does have some relevance to the confirmation vote, so I would like to talk.
Okay, come on up.
Our correctional officers' mental health, use of force, and the forced overtime problem. The National Institute of Justice finds a striking correlation between greater critical incident exposure and increased mental health symptoms for correctional officers. I quote, "Research suggests that changes in psychological stress following critical exposure are a primary mechanism connecting work-related critical incident exposure and mental health problems among correctional officers." After researching many studies regarding the challenges of correctional officers administering 2 CO job satisfaction surveys and talking to different frontline correctional staff and frontline healthcare staff, I believe there is a very intimate connection between forced overtime, the use of force, and the officer's mental health. As there is more forced overtime and more incidents of use of force, the officer's mental health can significantly suffer. As an officer's mental health improves, it helps the officer manage forced overtime and the use of force more effectively. Looking into 2025, focusing on these three priorities, as others, I believe will significantly improve the morale of our correctional officers, the safety of our residents, the compliance with the referendum, and the overall functioning of the jail. Regarding the use of force, as we know, our officers are in a unique situation in which Allegheny County is the only jail in the state of Pennsylvania in which the officers cannot use leg shackles, pepper spray, and the restraint chair because of the referendum. Much of their training in the past has been in using these three interventions. Here are two statements from two of our frontline officers concerning this issue, taken from our 2024 CO Job Satisfaction Survey. The administration refuses to provide training for use of force situations, but will fire you in a heartbeat if they deemed you used use of force incorrectly, even if you not had use of force training over 9 years. Quote, "Nothing has really improved, but over time has become worse. Officers are unsure of the use of force since officers have been disciplined or have been terminated. Absolutely no updated training. I believe a key component to improve the morale of our officers and staff retention is to give the officers the confidence and relative skill training in which they will be able to successfully intervene in cases of physical intervention with residents when verbal de-escalation techniques have not been successful. Regarding the officers' mental health needs, both Duquesne University and Western Psych appear interested in helping to design a mental health survey for our officers. The exorbitant overtime problem has been with us for a long time." I just want to finish this. It's one sentence.
Go ahead.
"With new leadership from our new warden, it is my hope we can finally turn the corner on this problem with an openness and fortitude to work together with our jail culture to find solutions to this monumental problem." Thank you.
Thank you. Sam Schmidt, do you want to go now? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm here to express my concerns about the selection process for the new warden of ACJ. This process has been marked by a lack of transparency, minimal community input, and a failure to prioritize the needs and voices of those most harmed by this institution. This is contrary to what the board has claimed publicly to be doing, which is confusing to me as a person looking from the outside in. The job description for this role outlines the need for a leader who will make the jail safe, secure, and humane while fostering community engagement and implementing innovative practices. Based on the limited information available, it is hard to believe that the process used to identify candidates would produce anyone capable of fulfilling these lofty goals. The subcommittee tasked with overseeing this process has met only once during the months-long search, and the opportunity for public input has been conspicuously absent. This tokenistic approach to engagement feels more like a checkbox exercise than a genuine attempt at transparency or accountability. There is a disconnect between the job description and the qualifications one might expect from someone handpicked through a closed, insular process. While the description emphasizes innovation and humanity, the resulting candidate will almost certainly come from a background steeped in traditional corrections work, upholding the punitive carceral system that has perpetuated harm for generations. Such a resume would reflect managerial efficiency over transformational vision, control over care, and compliance over compassion. Traditional work in corrections, no matter how extensive, will never address the profound failures of the Allegheny County Jail. The patterns of neglect, harm, and systemic violence that define this facility cannot be solved by someone whose expertise lies in maintaining the status quo. Humane care, providing adequate food, medical attention, and basic human dignity is not a lofty goal. It is the bare minimum, and even that is currently unmet at ACJ. Our community demands transformative leadership that prioritizes decarceration, addresses the root causes of incarceration, and actively reduces the harm caused by this facility. Anything less is an abdication of this board's responsibility to the people of Allegheny County, including those who are currently detained. This process is not just a failure of procedure, it is a reflection of this board's broader refusal to reckon with the need for systemic change. The community has long called for leadership that prioritizes abolitionist principles, reducing harm, harm, building alternatives to incarceration, and addressing the root causes of criminalization. Instead, we're met with the same performative gestures, cloaked in buzzwords like transparency and engagement, while the outcomes remain both predictable and harmful. The people of Allegheny County deserve more than theater. One sentence. The board should rethink this process entirely, centering those most impacted and committing to leadership that aligns with the values of justice, equity, and real transformation. Thank you.
Thank you. Marion Damick. And again, I remind everybody that if you're speaking now, you're speaking on actions that the board, on issues that the board is taking action on.
Okay. Wait. Here I am again. And I hope to be here for a number of years. I don't know how that's going to work for all of us. However, I just want to comment first about all the people in the audience, including me, came to the meeting last month, unlike the board, which didn't come much to the meeting. And then those that did come gradually, not so gradually, disappeared. We stayed, the whole group, because we're intense to know how to work with this jail and how to make it sufficient. I was going to say better, of course, but sufficient to reform the inmates who are here. And particularly, one of the particulars is the health care. You have got to get it doesn't have to be male, sorry. You have to get a head doctor. You absolutely have to find out what we are going to pay, because all the money that's yours spend, we spend. It's our money, and yours too. So we all are together in this. You all need a new med doctor, and we all need a better frame. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoops.
Tiffany Carter.
Hello. I just wanted to speak on the IWF payments and how it seems like unfair for the jail to want to take this money from inmates, even if it means that the phone calls will become cheaper whenever you guys are saying that that's going to become a thing. This money belongs to them. It's theirs and their families. It doesn't necessarily belong to the jails. You have families that are working tirelessly just to send funds to their loved ones while they're incarcerated, supporting them through phone calls and commissary and things of that nature. And so I'm asking the board to reconsider their decision when you want to get rid of these payments. To me, these funds represent hard work, sacrifice, and the love that the families have for their incarcerated loved ones. When the jail is speaking about doing away with these payments, this not only to me undermines the financial stability of those incarcerated, but also just totally disregards the relationships that they have with their families on the outside. Like, you all have $125 right now, but like, imagine if you didn't, and if you needed it. Imagine how that would feel. And so all I'm asking is for you to just reconsider the idea of getting rid of these payments, even though $125 is nothing to you. It's something to somebody that doesn't have anything. They deserve $125 plus more. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Gunther.
Hello, I'm Alan Gunther. It's Guenther, and I'm with the Pittsburgh Quakers. If Trevor Wingard is in fact appointed and confirmed tonight, we with the Quakers speak with hope about his potential appointment. We hope that he will continue the reforms instituted by Sarah Innamorado's administration and Acting Warden Beeson. And if the warden is confirmed tonight, one of the problems that he'll be facing is the serious overcrowding in the jail, the fact that the COs are working incredibly long hours is almost directly attributable to the probation detainer policies in the jail. And we're not here to talk about adjudications. We're here to talk about people being detained with probation detainers by Judge Bigley. And hundreds of people are in the jail for no good reason. What we're asking is that the Jail Oversight Board pay attention to the opportunity to get people out of jail. The national magazine, The Nation, pointed out that 96.3% of those supervised by Judge Bigley were detained on these probation detainers. And what we're asking, the magazine pointed out that Allegheny County Jail is one of the worst in the country for having these folks stay in jail for no good reason. And we're not asking that the jail be a model for the country in this particular way, but all we're asking is that the jail be average, that its policies and that the policies of the judiciary in Allegheny County meet national norms. And if that were to happen, you would see a drop in the population in the jail of 200 to 300 people, which would make a tremendous difference and would make the new warden's job easier.
Thank you.
Okay.
Tanisha Long.
Good evening. Tanisha Long. I'm with the Abolitionist Law Center. My original plan, I was fully prepared to come here and talk about the warden search. We're going to pivot a little bit since we've had the opportunity to talk to him and see the candidate. What I do want to talk about, though, is what we have to do moving forward. A lot of the issues in the jail come down to a lack of leadership, poor policy. It comes down to a lack of appreciation for incarcerated people. One of the few things we do that shows appreciation for incarcerated people is give them their money back. That 125 touches families in ways that you do not understand unless you've experienced it. And as someone who would be paying $125 more every month, myself, if that were taken away, I fully understand the impact of giving that money back to families. I also understand that some people in the jail do not have families. They do not have people looking out for them. And that $125 or whatever amount we end up at after the cost of phone calls decrease is vital. It's vital that we continue it in some form because these are people who have nothing. It is hard enough trying to eat that jail food, trying to buy hygiene products, trying to get toothpaste that doesn't taste like sand and garbage, trying to get Tylenol and aspirin and medical supplies. That commissary isn't just snacks and goodies and foods and treats like people think it is. There are actually vital supplies that people need there. And the thing that I would like to stress is what would we do with the money without it? There's no better thing we can do than put it directly in the hands of the people who need to contact their loved ones, the people who need to buy much needed and essential supplies, and the people who are paying the money to begin with. Another thing that I would like to point out, because this warden is going to have a lot of issues to deal with in the jail, it's winter time. If you guys recall, last year there was a letter written by incarcerated people on Pod 3B because the heat had gone out and nobody in the jail had bothered to let the Jail Oversight Board know. Right now, we have a heating problem where people are talking about being cold even though they have 2 blankets. One of the things that came out of that 3B letter was a commitment to not use the corner cells anymore because they're colder than every other cell in the jail. I know for a fact that those are being used. I can name 3 cells on 4C that are currently filled. We can't do this. We can't go back to the old ways of mistreating people, well, the current ways of mistreating people and finding ways to make their lives worse just because nobody's looking. And I tasked this new warden with behaving in a way that shows that he has a care and concern for the lives and the rights of incarcerated people. And we can shift away from this idea that just because you're incarcerated means that A, you're guilty, or B, you did something that is deserving of the cessation of your human and civil rights. We have a fresh start and we have an opportunity to do better. And if we can actually do that and engage in our population and continue to have community members come out, we will do a lot better job and end up in a different place. Thank you.
Thank you. Aiden Sedok? You'll wait? Okay. Kay Proctor?
I wasn't totally sure if I was going to make the cut to speak today, so I'm kind of unprepared, but I'm speaking on the inmates that are on AC right now. Currently, they're being housed on 6F. I guess the plan is for the next couple weeks that they're going back to 8E. Originally, they were on 8E, but I guess they went to 6F for 2 months. On 6F, they have been getting their showers every day. They've been able to order commissary, able to use the phone. But unfortunately, I guess the plan is for them to go back to AE, and they won't be able to use the phone. They'll only be getting 3 showers a week. Not able to order commissary. No religious services. There's just a number of things that are being violated as far as their rights. Let me see what else. Basically, I mean, I was here a couple months ago and I still had these concerns, and nobody's reached out on what the plan is with the AC people. I know there's only a handful of people, so I know the plan was in the beginning or throughout some time to open up another unit for the AC inmates, but I guess they came up with no plan and they're going back to AE. And like I said, their rights are being consistently violated with no phone calls, no commissary, no showers. The hygiene stuff has been stored outside the doors. It's just a violation of their rights. So I would like some answers eventually. Hopefully the new warden can put some new plans into effect for the AC inmates. And that's it.
Thank you. Stephen Fisher? You yield? Okay, thank you, sir. All right. Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for November 7?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Point of personal privilege, Judge, I just want to say that when we were at the jail a couple times this past week, the incarcerated individuals informed us that September was the last meeting minutes that they had on their tablets, and I know we're approving November and December today, but I would just like to ask why October isn't on there, and also when these 2 months that we just approved would be available on their tablets.
Encore, do you know?
It's not an Encore thing, it's a jail thing.
October is on the tablets, so
As of?
When it was put, I'd have to look, we don't have access to that sitting here, but it is up on the tablets, and as far as November and December, we typically take care of it the next day, once we have the physical
Thank you.
minutes.
Can you look into it and just verify October's on?
We'll screenshot and send it to the board.
Okay, thank you. Anybody opposed to approving the meeting minutes of November 7? Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 5?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the warden confirmation hearing. And before we move to vote on the confirmation of the warden, we're going to have a quick question and answer session. Each member of the board will be given 10 minutes, and I'll have the timer on, to ask the warden any questions that they deem relevant, and then we will proceed to discussion and then a vote. So if you wouldn't mind, warden, thank you. Or Mr. Wingard, not warden. Okay, Ms. Griffin.
I thought there was going to be a presentation from him first, but that's okay. I'll jump right in. I just have maybe 2 or 3 questions. We'll see how it goes. First of all, thank you for being here, and looking forward to hearing more from you. We still have children at the Allegheny County Jail. Not sure for how much longer, but can you talk to us about your experience, if any, with dealing with children incarcerated?
Sure. One of the facilities that I'm very familiar with, and the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections that I actually supervised, I supervised their team, their superintendent, their warden, for about 5 years, and that facility is in Indiana County, and they hold all the adjudicated individuals who are under the age of 18. So I had a lot of familiarity with those folks. So I know the policies, I know the law, somewhat familiar with the laws of sight and sound and all those things that they have to do at that facility. So I did not work directly in that facility. I supervised that facility for a lengthy period of time. And I got to see how the staff at that facility dealt with that population. It's obviously a different population, and it has to be separated from the rest of the facility, which is the first challenge. But once you're able to do that, then you treat those individuals with complete, understanding of that they are not like the other people inside that facility. Once you understand that, you can start making some progress. That's the facility in Indiana County, SCI Pine Grove.
Do you recall any specific problems that arose that you had to deal with, or any particular challenges dealing with that population?
When I would go there, and it was fairly often, and talking to those individuals, they were upset that they could not interact with the rest of the facility. That sounds a little surprising, but they wanted to be treated, a lot of them, not all of them, like the rest of the folks in the facility. They wanted to be allowed to go interact. And I remember some of them telling me it was because they felt like they could learn, they could mentor, but obviously that wasn't happening there at that time. It should still not be happening. But every now and then there would be an issue, there would be a disturbance or a fight over a basketball game, just like any facility. But for the most part, the numbers weren't great. I'm assuming at the ACJ the numbers are not great. So really, my experience with them, when I walk around and talk to them and get letters from them, were pretty much, why do we have to be separated by sight and sound from the rest of the population? Which is a little surprising. But
yeah, that is a little surprising. I think one thing I heard when I visited a pod from the boys was that they sometimes felt that they weren't allowed to do things that kids do, like, whether it was a game or it was, that they wanted to be treated like kids and not be treated like adults.
Mm-hmm. So. At that facility, at that time, they had started a fairly popular program with service puppies. So those puppies spent a lot of time on the juvenile pod. And there's 2 types of classifications of those individuals at that facility. It's 14 to 18, and then it's 18 to 21. So there's different levels there, and the staff at that facility, I think, I've traveled with them. So I went to South Carolina with several of the staff from that facility, including corrections officers, counselors, their superintendent, many other staff. We went to South Carolina to learn about what they were doing in South Carolina, and they wanted to learn about what we were doing in that facility, because I guess fortunately there's not a lot of those facilities, so you have to go other places to learn and network.
Okay. I'm going to pivot to a different thing, and I'm going to preface it, so just bear with me. There will be a question at the end. On one of my visits, I met with some residents who, they certainly had usual concerns about lockdowns and food, and cold was one of them too. But they also had something positive to share about one of the corrections officers. And what they found positive about their relationship with that officer was that they said they knew what he expected from them, and they knew what to expect from him. And to me, it spoke to a culture, at least of mutual understanding, if not mutual respect, at least for that group of people. And so culture is an issue in the Allegheny County Jail, that it can impact the residents, it can impact the officers. And so my question is, how do you deal with a culture change? How do you impose a culture change? Is it winning hearts and minds, or is it laying down the law and this is how it's going to be, or is it something else?
All the above that you mentioned so far, but I think, you mentioned the consistency of that corrections officer. That's a great story. I have some ideas about how to start to allow that to permeate. And that may be another question at some point, or I can talk about it whenever you want me to. But that whole shift is not obviously going to happen overnight. I've said a few times to folks over the years and recently, a correctional facility is a large organization. Obviously, there's so many stakeholders. You're not going to move that ship, so to speak, always in the correct course. My preference is that even if that ship is a little bit off course, that I'm okay with that as long as there's not 100 rowboats off the side of the ship, all the factions doing their own thing. My experiences and where I felt like when I walked out of a long day at work, and I kind of walked out knowing we've made some changes, some nuanced changes that are starting to turn the tide in the facility. I've gone into a facility that's had a lot of the same issues that maybe the ACJ has. That ship we have to be moving in the same direction. We may be a little off course, but we can't have 100 different factions moving in their own direction. So that shift has to start with all of us getting on the same page. The things you talked about there, whether it's just here's the way it's going to be or nuances, I prefer for the staff there to watch how I work. I will never ask them to do something I haven't done in my career, but I think when I tend to walk around with a lot of different staff, whether it's an officer, a nurse, a deputy, whoever, and I think when they see maybe how I interact and how I expect them to interact with folks, that maybe they'll see that there's a different way. Maybe like the officer you mentioned, hopefully he or she is one of many, but if not, if they can watch how I believe it should happen, that can start to shift. Not overnight, but it can start to shift.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some frustration from the board and from residents that, so that some arbitrariness. So there seems to be a policy that's happening, but then it's not being followed, or it's changing, but we never know what it is. That kind of, feel sense of arbitrary or things happening on a whim as opposed to being consistent and knowing what to expect.
Well, it's very common sense speaking. It's common sense corrections, but if the warden cannot communicate on a continuous basis with all stakeholders, it may sound a little presumptuous, but I already have an email drafted to all the staff at that facility from me for hopefully day one, the morning of day one, introduction, what my expectations are, a little bit talking about accountability, communication. It will get to the point where this board and the folks down there will get to the point where they can probably just delete it because they already heard it from me when they're talking to me, or it gets to the point where another email from him, I already know this. Over communication is never going to hurt an administration. The opposite will.
I am going to yield the rest of my time. I think that's all I've gotten.
Thank you. Judge Bigley.
I don't know if is this working? I've had the opportunity to have all my questions answered on previous occasions, so I have no questions for Mr. Wingard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Honor. Thank you, Honor.
Sheriff Kraus.
Good afternoon. First, I just want to say thank you for your accessibility over the last few days. I know it's probably been a pretty tiring period for you.
Okay.
And therefore, I don't have any questions. All the questions I've had have been answered by you. And again, thank you for for accessibility.
Welcome.
Thank you. Controller O'Connor.
Yes, thank you for your willingness to serve. I'm going to sort of piggyback off Barbara's point was, how do you see the role of the board and then, in partnering with us to implement those changes? Obviously, transparency, I think, is a huge point for us. So just, is there anything else you can elaborate and that you would like us to do with you to partner to make some changes?
I have a lot of ideas about that. Number one.
Keep them short because I only have 10 minutes. So, sorry.
I'll do my best. So I think that you all, and the administration at that facility needs to be have a shared vision. I've watched countless hours of these meetings. I would like us to get to a point, sir, where we can focus the hour or 2 hours on those folks talking and us just saying, we already know that. We've had meetings between our meetings where we're on the same page. Am I thinking that we're always going to agree and there'll never be disagreements? Obviously, I know better. However, I think these meetings, the forum should be hearing from the folks, the community about what they feel we need to do at that facility, and all of you in the administration at the ACJ being on that same page for that shared vision. That may be a little lofty based on all the different feelings about, corrections and incarceration. I don't think it is. I worked in a facility one time where we had a very close relationship with the local hospital. We had meetings with their board at the local hospital. Other correctional facilities don't have to do that. But when you work in one that has a relationship with the local hospital, you better be meeting with the board. I'm comfortable with making sure you're all aware of what we're doing, so you're not blindsided.
Yeah, and I think that leads into my next question about the public, and obviously we have a lot of stakeholders in this room that come to almost every meeting, and I think it's great that you're mentioning that. So your format with working with the public, obviously they can reach out to you and you can have those conversations through the county executive, but you're almost saying that in a way you want us to change our forum, that if somebody comes up with a question at this month's meeting, you're willing to follow up and give in your presentation a follow-up to that individual at the next board meeting. Is that kind of what I got from that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unless there's a better.
Yeah, no,
way.
that's great. That's a great answer. Yeah, that's kind of where we see it, because we have so many organizations that are so involved and impacted here that if you're willing to do that, I think that's a huge step. So our office did 2 audits, and I didn't expect you to read them at this point, but one was on staffing. We hear all the time on jail staffing. That's huge. And I'm sure you can talk about that. The other one we did was on children of incarcerated caregivers. And I think that's something that we saw 11,000 kids were impacted by a stay in the jail. So for us, it's, okay, how are we going to impact those families outside? We have so many family members that come and speak to us. So I think that's something that, an initiative, I don't know if you've seen it in other places, but that's something that would be really important to make sure that the kids and families know what's going on. And then if you don't mind, talk about that briefly. And then staffing is a huge one. That's more, I think, morale, forcing overtime. Just quick thoughts on those 2.
Yes, sir. I did read those reports. And so I was down here before. We didn't talk about that yet, but I was at the ACJ briefly about 15 years ago. And I remember my first week I met with the folks at Pittsburgh, Machi, I think. They had some really great programs over there. Reading your report, I was a little surprised that not a lot of children of incarcerated adults were involved with those programs, their ambassador and their extended family programs. Hopefully that can be bolstered if Amachi is on board with that. I know that DHS, and I worked with Director Dalton earlier in my career when I was here, and I know they're all in. The meeting I've had several meetings, obviously. Probably the most, no disrespect to the board or anybody else in here, but the probably most encouraging meeting I had the other night with a bunch of advocates. The passion they have for what's going on down there. We could have talked all night. We couldn't, obviously, but a lot of that passion is about taking care of, breaking the cycle of people coming to prison or jail. So I have a lot of thoughts on incarcerated children or incarcerated adults, to the point where I've worked in a facility where, if nothing else, if you can't make the front door in the visiting area more welcoming, you're missing that opportunity, which is not a hard thing to do. So I have a lot of thoughts on that. And the staffing issue, I again have a lot of issues or questions, or not questions, thoughts on. In your report, I read about electronic scheduling. I'm not sure that's happening. I would venture to guess it's not happening. I'm very familiar with ushering in electronic scheduling. There's the challenges to that, obviously, but perhaps that needs to be a conversation that needs to be revisited, open that back up to finding out why we haven't moved to electronic scheduling, and the question about morale earlier and the question about moving the needle as far as the shift down there. Over time, I believe that can start bringing people to want to work there. I have no issue going anywhere in this county and talking to people, prospective employees, about why they should come there. The corrections career sometimes really gets forgot when it comes to criminal justice. It's been a great career for me, and it was a great career, and I have no problem explaining to anybody coming in, whether they're a nurse, a corrections officer, or a social worker, about the benefits of working down at that facility, which in turn can start shifting with the overtime.
No, that's great, and I'm glad you're forward thinking on that, because we definitely need that. So, two language questions that came up on Monday when we had our presentation. You had used the terms broken window. Can you explain why you implemented that type of language and how that would work there? I mean, obviously, I know the bad language that goes around it. It was said in that meeting, and I just wanted to see how you meant it in that meeting on Monday.
What I meant is it's just an old, very common criminology theory, and that
right, yeah.
If you allow the small issues to go on and fester, they will turn to big issues. So you allow a broken window in a community, you allow a broken window, you allow dirt on the floor in a correctional facility, the understanding of everyone involved is that's okay. Seems like a small issue. It's not a small issue. If you only clean for inspections, or you only clean when the county officials are coming to visit or other officials are coming, if you only clean then, and I'm not saying that's what's happening now, I haven't been in there, but what I'm saying is I'm a big proponent of dealing with the small issues before they continue to.
Okay, yeah, so there's terminology around this, and I remember with policing that's not terminology that I like to be used. So that's why when you said it, something went off. But if you mean, making sure the place is clean, that's a different kind of conversation than what I took that language to mean. And then I know you also mentioned about doing something with mini units, like managers. Can you explain what that would be on each floor?
So if 1/3 of my career, I was in a middle management position in the Department of Corrections called unit manager. I believe there are many wardens. So that facility is obviously different than what I'm used to. What I'm used to is a housing unit over here, and 200 yards between them. That facility has levels. In my opinion, it's extremely conducive to instituting unit management there. You put someone who doesn't necessarily have a security background, doesn't necessarily have a treatment background, but is a big picture thinker, is forward thinking, and they manage that housing unit. And they report directly to a warden who then will report to me. I'm very familiar with many wardens inside of prisons handling housing units. For instance, on the medical unit, you would surely want to put someone who has extensive medical background, but also knows how to talk to people, maybe not clinical, in a clinical way, but knows how to work with the nurses, work with the mid-levels, all those folks. That would be a non-uniform position. That would be something that we would obviously interview for if approved. If nothing else, I would like to at least pilot that on a floor or two to try it in the facility, and then modify as we need to, or see how it works.
So on that, so the style of our building compared to others that you've been in, what are your sort of thoughts on that? I mean, when I do tours, it's very difficult moving around. I mean, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I did work.
And you were there for 6 to 8 months years ago. I remember that.
Sure, I did
from your
work at one
resume, yeah.
facility. I'm sorry. I did work at one facility where you took your jacket off in the morning, you didn't put it back on unless you went outside to make rounds outside. So I am familiar with under one roof concept. Wasn't tiered like that one is. I think there's some advantages to it and some disadvantages. You don't have people 200 yards away or 300 yards away across a yard or all these things you got to navigate through. In big correctional facilities, there's sectioned off fences and things like that you got to get through to get to an issue. There, not so much. I remember my first day thinking, I got to take an elevator up to there, but they moved pretty quick, and we did manage to get from point A to point B a lot faster than I thought we could. But I don't have an issue with the physical plant of that facility. I kind of like the idea that we're all there together and there's different floors, and it's conducive to management on every other floor where the housing units aren't.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, and thank you for your desire to join my administration. I have a few questions for the sake of the public. So can you talk about some concrete examples when you've taken an innovative approach to corrections that challenged the status quo, and how you kind of were successful in the implementation of those programs?
Sure. So one of the facilities I went to had some issues leading up to my arrival, to say the least. Figured out right away that we had to start working on that culture. And it was a facility that probably was not real open to the idea of bringing some of these programs in that we brought in. Very proud to say that those programs are still there and they're still very active, and they've now transferred to other facilities, not just in Pennsylvania, but other places, other jurisdictions. I mentioned it before, it sounds really simple, it sounds common sense, but when you introduce 5 to 10 service dogs into a correctional facility that's never been used to something like that, how fast that shifted that culture and got everyone on board. It was the first program I was experienced with, or I got to experience, that neither the population of the incarcerated individuals or the staff really had any bad. There was really no pushback from anybody, and the only pushback came from my leadership group right around me, because I came in there. I left that facility 20 years earlier, where I started as a corrections officer. So when I came back 20 years later and started to talk about bringing 8-month-old or 8-week-old puppies into a facility to get people to understand that there's a human side to all this, it wasn't met by my exact surrounding team real well. But after a few months, the puppies were in and out of their offices on a regular basis. So it started to go really well, and it still is. And now it's to the point where it's the only facility that I'm aware of in the country that they're allowing the dog to have the puppies in the prisons, and they get weaned off from the mother by the inmates who are there. Very proud of that program. And then some other programs we did there too. They sound really simple, and my point to this is small incremental changes will start making big changes.
Do you want to take a moment to list some of the other programs that you've implemented?
Sure. So, there's programs. I worked in a medical facility for a long time too. That our focus was medical. They had some great programs. I worked there twice. I worked there as a unit manager, and I worked there as a superintendent. And quite honestly, I learned more working as a unit manager there, because I got to work with the line staff, the nurses, the officers who worked with people who were really in bad shape. They had the dialysis unit there for the whole state. They had a hospice program there for the whole state. So we had to luckily just nuance changes some of those programs. That facility, to their credit, had some of those programs in place before my arrival, but helping them, being the unit manager on the medical units, helping them enhance those programs and work with those programs. Another one, sounds very simple, you take a gray, drab area, and you start getting, you find out who in your facility is talented, and you get them some paint and you get them some materials, and you allow them to go around and fix areas like just not staff areas, but also areas where the residents are at. Incarcerated individuals live in those areas. So what we did systematically, we made sure that whatever areas they were going to go fix and paint and make really nice, one area would be an officer's locker room or an officer's staff dining hall. The next area would be a housing unit where people live. It got to the point where it was so popular that one day I walked onto a housing unit and I found pictures of my staff who were against it in the beginning inside the murals. They allowed the inmates to start putting their images in the murals that they were painting on the housing units. That's buy-in from staff. You know, I'm not suggesting that the third or fourth day at ACJ we're going to start painting murals and bringing 10 puppies in. That's not my suggestion. My suggestion is through small incremental changes and getting people to understand there's another side to this, you can start making big changes. There's a few others. I don't know for time, how much time we have, but there's some other ones too.
That's okay. I have one more question. So can you talk about your experience working with the community and your previous roles and what your philosophy is in working with the public moving forward?
So when I first started out, obviously I was a corrections officer, but I only did that for a couple years. But early on as a corrections, or maybe 6-8 months into that position, I got called from a major who said, "Do you want to work in the visiting room?" Sure. I'll work in the visiting room. It's the front door of the facility. It's where people coming from the outside, in an SCI, in a prison, the difference is they were coming from Philadelphia. They're coming from all around the state to visit. So they're coming, they're driving all day, they get there, and the last thing they want to do is be met with misery. So I looked forward to doing that. I did that as a corrections officer. I immediately had contact with the community on a daily basis. They were coming to see their loved ones, and me and the other officers who worked in that area did our best to make sure that was not a miserable experience. Then later on, I went to a caseworker position, and I got to work with outside agencies to help get folks out of incarceration when they, at the very earliest point they were eligible by law to get out. So if they had a sentence of 2 to 4 years and they were eligible to get out at 1 year point, I was the person in that facility that helped them get out at that 1 year point. And until that 1 year point, we worked with outside organizations in the community for them to do work every day. Leave the facility, almost like work release, go out all day, work Monday through Friday at nonprofit organizations, learning how to do cement work and general construction work. Great program to watch those guys come back at the end of the night, put good day's work in, be tired, and earn some money. Then I went to a facility that had the medical mission, and that was a game changer because now you have a lot of folks, a lot of advocates coming in every day to get involved. You had families coming in that we could teach how to help their loved one when he comes out deal with being in a wheelchair. He wasn't in a wheelchair maybe till he came to our facility because something happened, and then he came to our facility. So our nurses, our staff brought families in to help them. So we had constant communication with families and advocates wanting to come in and talk to different individuals who are incarcerated there. Always, that facility was very involved with the community and the advocates that were heavily invested in the people who were at that facility and still are. So throughout different positions, and then my last position in the last 5 years where I got to supervise 8 to 10 prisons, I had a lot of interaction with people wanting to talk about what was going on in one of those facilities, one of them being the juvenile facility, which got a lot of attention. So all the facilities that I got to supervise at the end of my career were all very diverse. They all had a different mission. So I had different people from the community, advocates wanting to talk about things that were going on in that facility. I've, interviews and however they wanted to communicate with me about that, we did. So various ways and various levels throughout my career in different missions, but it's never been a problem for me to I think the stakeholders, I think sometimes, I mentioned the other day when I talked to all those folks and the energy was in that room and how passionate they are about that place down there. I think if you don't allow that to continue and even make it more effective for them to communicate with the warden, you're missing a real opportunity.
Thank you for that.
welcome.
And we have about 1 minute. Could you just talk about very quickly your approach to reentry? You're no longer working in a prison system, you're working in a jail, people are there short term. What's your take on reentry and getting people back out into the community?
Yes, of course. I know this may sound a little lofty, but I mean this. I don't care if they're down there, in intake, and we know the people who work there know they're going to be leaving in a couple weeks or leaving in a few months. That has to start right there. So you have to have staff working in that area who will communicate to anybody coming in that door. That's where law enforcement meets corrections. We all know that. That's where the handoff is. First of all, that handoff, I need to take a look at that handoff. But that being said, that reentry starts on day one. I've read some things about the last few months they can do this, the last few weeks they can do this. Talking about reentry, especially in a jail setting, needs to start on day one. You have to, providing, you have a situation where you have staff in that area who are willing to do some of these things, and we will, you have to be able to communicate to those individuals coming in there that it might be their first time ever coming to a correctional facility. You have to understand that, and you have to give them a little bit of hope by saying, you're here now, but here's what this place can do for you. Whether you're here for a week or you're here for a little under 2 years, here's what can happen for you here. So I have a lot of experience with helping people get into programming outside of facilities. I actually have a lot of feelings on pre-release or reentry, but I think it starts in intake, day one.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it's feasible to have a puppy program in ACJ?
I think it's feasible if we get a unit manager on a housing unit that would willing to take on the role of piloting that. I know some who would.
I think
if we get
it's
there.
such a great program, and I would volunteer to help, and I would bring you some volunteers to help.
What's
So-
great, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What's great about that program, Your Honor, is not just what it does for the folks inside the facility. What I watched evolve over the years was the staff and the former staff that are now not connected every day with the facility that come in every day. And see, it's not just the puppy living in the facility. The staff or their volunteers, they come in and take those dogs out to the community, get them to different events, concerts, whatever, and they allow them to become very socialized. And then they start realizing this puppy can go to someone who's in a wheelchair. This puppy can go to someone who has a hearing deficit, whatever the case. And then they train them for that year, and then they go to another program and train for a year. Some of the best days I've had in prison was after those puppies left and were gone for a couple of years, and then we got a call saying the recipient would like to bring the puppy back in to meet with the inmate who trained that dog for a year. Those are great days inside of a facility to see that reconnection. I think, obviously I want to talk to the administration about that and see how they feel, but I dealt with administration when we brought that in who were less than warm to it. It worked out.
Nothing boosts morale like a puppy, right?
Some,
Okay.
unless you're allergic to them.
Okay, you're aware of the staffing shortages that we have, particularly with COs, and we talked about that in our earlier sessions, and I know you have a lot of ideas about recruitment and getting more applicants, but at the same time, something also needs to be done with this overtime, because basically everybody who is a CO for their first year is working 80 hours a week, and it's just, it's not healthy, it's not sustainable, it's horrendous. And I certainly don't expect you to fix that problem in a day, but you are going to work on it. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes.
And also what I'm hoping, and you said earlier, is that you're willing to sit down with the union representatives, because I'm on the Employee Welfare Committee, and we've had some meetings with the union representatives, and I think they have some good ideas about how to reduce this overtime, short of bringing in a big, huge new recruit class. So are you willing to sit down with them and talk with them?
Absolutely. I watched a presentation last month with the gentleman about recruitment. I think it was you asked about retainment. That's where that's what I want to start digging into fairly quickly. Obviously, we got to recruit. And I think there's 12 to 15 officers now at the academy who will be starting in February, I believe, or March. I know that everyone's struggling with this. We struggled with it before I retired in the DOC during COVID. It was a big struggle, but they've made a lot of inroads the last couple of years. I'm still in communication with those folks. So I have some ideas about what they've done and what's been going on nationally on that level. It's what everyone's talking about nationally, not just in corrections. But I have some ideas, but the fact that you have a talent manager down there and it was allowed to hire someone else to assist, that's great. I'll be involved heavily with that, but also retainment. Everyone knows if you're a golfer, you'll understand this. You can't hit a 9-iron from right here and not hit 3 or 4 universities. They're everywhere. So hopefully we're out talking to universities, we're talking to people, we're letting them tour the facility, we're sparking some interest. I've always struggled with the fact that everyone coming out of college with a criminology or criminal justice degree wants to go into anything but corrections. I have lots of I used to teach adjunct college. I've had lots of former students of mine who are now working in facilities, still email me and still contact me, who knew nothing about corrections until they took that class and they learned a little bit about it. Now they're having very good, thriving careers in corrections. We have to get out and talk about the ACJ and what it offers, my opinion.
Okay, thank you, and I thank you for all the time that you have given this board and the community. You've been working around the clock, and it's very appreciated.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
I'm not yielding any time, Mr. Perkins. I'll give you 2 of my minutes, Mr. Perkins.
That should give to me.
Oh my gosh. I believe Judge Bigley gave me hers.
I didn't hear that.
I think
no,
not.
she did not say that.
Go ahead.
Mr. Wingard, thanks again for being with us.
You're welcome, sir.
I think this is the 5th time we met so far. How many minutes do you think you've spent speaking this week?
A lot of time speaking, a lot of time driving, a lot of time reacclimating myself to parking in the city of Pittsburgh.
So I think a lot of my questions will be questions I've already asked you and some discussions we've had about commitments between, and it's a two-way street. This board needs to work to establish relationship of trust and accountability with the warden and the leadership team, and I think we've been improving there, and we can be better. But we're going to ask the same from you. But you're up for the job today, so I guess I get to ask you the questions
Sure.
at this point. So you talked a little bit about transparency, and I'm asking you some. I think I'll start with some yes or no answers for the most part, but I do want to hear some more substantive answers as well. So you talked about transparency. Can we count on you to commit to really being transparent with this board and communicating timely and openly about issues in the jail?
Yes, sir.
And yeah, we talked as well that there's probably certain boards that are not as active and energetic as our board, and that could be positive or negative depending on your perspective. But this board has a lot of energy and a lot of, I think, expertise. Yeah, we have criminal court judges, we have the county controller, we have a county council person, we have Manny who sits out in front of the jail multiple times a week and speaks to people leaving and helps people get housing and things of that nature. So we do have unique expertise, and I think we can help each other. But one thing is communication to the board about issues going on inside, but another part of it is we want to be a part of your team to identify a shared vision and identify some of the core priorities. Can we commit, or can you commit to that?
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to ask you in a minute about some of your initial priorities, and I'm not saying this should be the first thing you do, but I'm hoping one of the first things you'll do is agree to meet with the entire board where we can just get to know one another and start talking about what our priorities will be for the first year and throughout your tenure.
Hopefully next week.
And just to talk about some of the positive things going on in the jail, and I know many individuals working in the jail who I think extremely highly of. They're hardworking, they're thoughtful, they're committed to the cause of treating people in the jail humanely and with respect, and I think that benefits everyone. But one of the things that we have made some progress on is mental health treatment and substance use treatment. It's in the works, and we're still working on that. But is that going to be one of your priorities, is to work to improve health care in the jail?
Yes, sir.
So those are my closed-ended questions. From your perspective, what is the formula for a successful working relationship with the board?
Obviously, we have to continuously meet, have transparency, and be honest with each other. And it can't just be the first month, the second month. We're going to disagree at some point. That doesn't mean we're not going to continue to talk. I look at this as an advantage for the facility, for this leadership team over here. I haven't had, like my last 5 years where I was supervising 10 prisons, it was me and the administrations in that prison and, one or two individuals in the governor's office. So I am not, extremely experienced in dealing with a board who oversees a correctional facility. I look at it as an advantage. I've watched hundreds of hours of these meetings. I feel like I know all of you because of watching those meetings. Some of the same folks that are here, I've listened to speak about things. A few times I wanted to just go through my laptop and answer what they needed an answer for. I wasn't in a position to do that. I will be now. I really believe that if this group of people and the other folks down there are not working with this board, we will be a neutral, and neutral's backwards. It's not forward. We have to continue moving this forward. We will misstep. We will, I may ask you, or I may bring a pilot into this institution, a pilot program, where after a few months, we need to modify that pilot or we need to pull the plug on it. I am not a fan of we're going to implement something down there, and 3 years later we say, that has not been working for 3 years. We will pull the plug on it and try something else. But that has to be with constant communication and shared vision. If the shared vision is not that the folks coming in there are not going to leave better than what they came as, if that's not the shared vision at the end of the day, I don't want to be part of this. I don't. I want to be part of this because I think the shared vision is going to be folks coming in there from this county are going to leave better than what they came in as. That has to be the shared vision, and we constantly communicate that. I would love for these meetings to get so mundane, because we've already talked and we already have the answers, that we can devote all the time to these folks to talk about their concerns. And I mean that. I would like to get to that point. Hope that answers your question, sir.
It does. Thank you. That's an excellent answer. I guess one of the questions I have related to the presentation where you talked about population reduction, and I put a lot of thought into this question over the past year. What role do you see that the jail should play in the broader ecosystem of the justice system? I guess that's one part of the question. The other part of the question is, what specifically do you think you can do as the warden to reduce the jail population?
Well, there's a few things quickly. I have a very good, obviously relationship with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, their population management folks. I'm sure there's some folks sitting down at the ACJ who need to get moving to the state prison system. Hopefully that's happening on a regular basis. We will take a look at that. There's probably 30 or 40 of them down there. Population management, it's probably what, as a unit manager, I did. That was what I did, in different facilities and in different ways, but it improves the whole entire facility. I remember when I came here the first time, I misspoke to a reporter about, I thought we could probably move a lot of people out of there in a big hurry. And I got a call saying, did you always say that? And I said, absolutely, I said that. Because after walking around for a couple of days and actually reading jackets and talking to the deputies and talking to the records folks and the probation and parole folks, I found out that there were people sitting down there who should not be sitting down there. They needed to be diverted or taken somewhere else. Hopefully that's not happening, but we will examine that, obviously. Someone said it earlier that it benefits everyone to reduce the population. I wholeheartedly agree with that. You can make a lot of significant changes, pilot programs and do things like that once you have that under control, so to speak. When you're opening housing units and you're opening wings and you're putting people in beds that you don't feel comfortable putting people in those beds, that's not good for anybody. The people who work there, the people who reside there, that's not good for anybody. So if population management isn't a constant conversation with the warden and the administration, it will be. It has to be. And I think at least piloting some unit management concepts about how to control that, how to get people moving, will slow. There's a lot of different variables with population management. There's not one secret to it. There's a lot of them. But when you put them all together, it can make an impact.
I have one idea. I think the executive's arraignment diversion program is a real opportunity to reduce the jail population. DHS and the jail has been working on that for a long time, and I think it can be a very impactful way to accomplish that goal. How much time do I have? I got lost. So I had one kind of rephrase a question I asked you before, that as an attorney who's been going to the jail since 2006 as a public defender, oftentimes I hear security as a reason to say no to whatever I want to do, oftentimes, and I understand security is necessary within an institution, but it shouldn't be. I think oftentimes it's counterproductive. For example, if because of security I can't go visit my client, and then if I can't visit my client's not happy, maybe they had an opportunity to be released and help with population reduction. Another issue is because of security and staffing is related to this. There's lockdowns and people can't, they miss out on family member visits, things of that nature. And you and I already talked about the fact that only 6% of the people in the jail are actually serving a sentence imposed by a judge. The vast majority of people are awaiting a trial. They've been convicted of nothing, or they're awaiting a probation violation. And one way for people to get out is to meet with their attorneys, and their attorneys, it's sometimes the attorney's fault, but we cannot have all the restrictions we have now where we close attorney-client visitation twice a day. So I guess your philosophy on that, safety as a reason to say no, do you see things differently? Do you see where it might actually be beneficial to safety and security for people to be able to visit with their attorneys and visit with their family members?
I've worked in facilities where it became a crutch. That's just that buzzword or that phrase. It's because it's for the security of the facility. That can become a crutch or an excuse. I'll give you one little fast story. I know we're limited on time. I was inspecting a prison one time, a large prison, and they had a verified real escape attempt where the individual tried to go over a fence. Obviously, I was the supervisor, the person who's in charge of locking that facility down. And I kind of stood off into the back and just let him and his command staff do their job. After a few minutes, maybe a half an hour, I was looking at the cameras and I saw about 5 to 10 people still in their visiting room. The visits has just started for the day. The point of that story is that individual, that warden of that facility, did not, including one attorney, throw everyone out of the visiting room and say, for security reasons, we're shutting down the visiting room. It had nothing to do with what was happening on the other side of the facility. Nothing. B, he was forward-thinking enough to understand that some of those folks probably drove. The facility was in Erie, PA. So he was smart enough and forward-thinking enough to understand that some of those folks drove, maybe from Philly overnight, stayed in a hotel the night before at their own expense, and came into the visiting room. The last thing he was going to do, because that's not the way he thought, and it wasn't because I was there, just that's the kind of people I surrounded myself with. He thought, I'm not going to lock this visiting room down or close this visiting room because we have an issue going on in the other side of the facility. It can become a crutch. And again, I have not stepped foot in the ACJ in a long time. So if that's an issue that it's being overused, we can't allow an attorney in, we can't do visits this way, we can't do this way, we can't treat inmates a certain way because of security. I'm going to drill down a little bit further and say, tell me what exactly that means. You can easily say it's for security reasons. And I'm not saying early in my career as a corrections officer, maybe even a caseworker, I didn't say that, as a brand, first couple years of my career. But over time and through experience, I found out that does become a crutch. And when I'm told that, the first time I'm told that, I'm going to ask some questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tell me when you start.
Hold on, I gotta reset it.
It's going to be like speed dating here, okay?
Ready?
Yes.
Go.
All right, Mr. Wingard, I'm going to go through my questions, and I will let you know a time limit for each, for which I will start my own timer if needed. First question. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, more than half of all jail deaths occur within a month of admission, but most deaths from drug or alcohol-related causes, including overdose and withdrawal, occur during the first 2 days. 30 seconds. What will you do to overhaul the intake department at the Allegheny County Jail, which has a horrific and tragic history of avoidable deaths, many of which occur within the first 24 and 48 hours of admission? Go.
It's my understanding that at the facility, and I hope I'm assuming this is correct, that area is being overseen by a captain and a sergeant. I'll be changing that. There'll be someone higher in the rank, higher in the chain of command at that facility who will be reporting straight to me. The intake area is a concern of mine, and I think you'll see significant changes in there, starting with who supervises it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, how do I start this over? Okay. Yes or no, will you commit to turning away individuals who are not well enough for the jail and who instead should receive treatment at a hospital?
You mean at intake?
Yeah, at intake. Yes, thank you. Okay, next question. Allegheny County voters overwhelmingly approved a referendum to ban the use of solitary confinement, restrictive housing, disciplinary housing, administrative custody, or whatever name anybody wants to use semantics-wise. And yet in the years since, the jail administration has repeatedly violated the clear requirements outlined in the law. 30 seconds. How will you ensure that solitary confinement is not used in the Allegheny County Jail and that everyone inside receives the maximum amount of recreational and out-of-cell time as possible and never less than the minimum required in the ordinance, which is 4 hours a day? Go.
That's a tough one for 30 seconds, but I'll do my best. So hopefully before that referendum came, that this facility was already working on that, because nationally it's been in it's been 10 years. I was on a statewide chair of a statewide committee to address solitary confinement or long-term segregation, as we referred to it as. It does nobody any good, including the staff working in those areas. They may not feel that way, but it does nobody any good to keep someone locked down for an exuberant amount of time. Obviously, I'm going to find out if that's happening.
Sure, that was 30 seconds, but can you tell me how you will do that?
Well, I'm going to obviously talk to the administration here and find out what we're doing, how someone who's in that area actually does come out of their cell. I want to put eyes to that and see how it looks, and then we'll start working on that to ensure that that's not happening.
Okay.
It should have been worked on 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question. Recruitment at carceral facilities across the country has become harder and harder, and there is little reason to believe that reality will dramatically change in the coming years. According to the Prison Policy Initiative's analysis of the Census Bureau's annual survey of public enrollment and payroll, the total correctional workforce has shrunk by 11% in state prisons and 7% in local jails since 2020, and agencies are expected to see on average a 6% decline in employment over the next 10 years. Based on their analysis of the studies out there, pay increases haven't worked, easing employment requirements hasn't worked, staff wellness programs haven't worked, new facility constructions haven't worked, and other desperate measures have not worked either. They conclude decarceration is the most straightforward workable solution to the problems for which understaffing is blamed. I heard you give an answer to a similar question earlier about reducing the jail population. Can you say yes or no, will you commit to working with all the various entities involved in the criminal legal system to reduce the jail's population that will in turn improve living conditions and working conditions for those community members and workers who remain behind?
Absolutely, yes.
And can you please give me specific examples in 30 seconds how you will do that?
Well, you're exactly right. It's got to be all the entities that you just mentioned, ma'am. It can't just be a warden. It can't just be the courts. It's got to be everybody involved with starting to reduce the population of that facility. And you can't, if you start making some inroads and then one day I look at the computer, I look at my phone, and we went up 100 in the last 2 days, I can't be set back by those missteps. We have to find out why, and we have to continue to work on reduction. There's a bunch of different ways we have to do that, but they all have to come together. And talking to the advocates the other night, I remember what night it was at this point, they had some great ideas, the energy from them about how we can do that.
So we'll listen to the community and work together to make it happen.
this board, including, we all have to work together to make that happen.
Thank
It
you.
benefits everybody.
Okay, great. I really appreciate that. Next question. The previous administrations of both the jail and the county not only tolerated but encouraged a culture of violence and punishment at the Allegheny County Jail. Vic's toxicity permeated its way through all aspects of life and work at the jail over the past 12 years, bringing about the horrendous and deadly conditions that people have suffered through for years now. It will take a lot of hard work, as I can tell you know already, to undo the harm and work forward. Can you please give me specific examples in 30 seconds or less of how you will begin to deconstruct the culture of violence and punishment, and what will be the guiding principles of the new culture you attempt to build in the ACJ?
Sure. Well, in all fairness, watching your meetings the last few months, I've been very encouraged by what Interim Dady and Acting Warden Beeson are starting to do. I mean, Acting Warden Dady, I'm very familiar with him. We've worked together before. So I did see some positive. I saw some positions being hired in intake. The fact that you're putting the board and the jail are putting so much emphasis on recruitment and now going to be retainment as well, that's obviously a shift. That has to be a shift. It can't be tolerated. If discipline is anything other than corrective in nature, it's inappropriate. So if you're doing anything that's anything other, I'm very familiar with pilot programs that allow the corrections officers to administer programs on their housing unit. Another program that I've been experienced with where the population and the officers, including the union, bought all in the way we allow them to run their housing units without us administering discipline. It worked wonderfully. It's another pilot that we're going to talk about.
I can't wait to learn about all these pilots and tell you some of my own ideas as well. So next question is, I read an interview about you where you talked about the swift, certain, fair model approach to discipline and punishment instead of a more restorative approach. Yes or no, is the swift, certain, fair model something you plan to implement in the ACJ?
Yes, that's just what I referenced.
Okay, and then my follow-up question to that, a more open-ended question. In Swift, Certain, Fair, it talks about lower-level discipline that is done by unit managers. Can you please tell me what lower-level discipline looks like to you?
So we had a problem in that facility and statewide where the disconnect between an offender does something wrong and they may not go see the hearing examiner, the judge in the facility for a week. By then, they forgot what they did wrong. And then the administration of justice by that hearing examiner can affect their parole, can affect their work status, can affect their visiting status. It's a week later. So what we implemented, we did a study group and we did a control group. And we implemented letting the corrections officers handle lower level issues. And the corrective action may be for the rest of today, for the next 4 hours, you're going to your cell. I don't want to hear about it anymore. Versus a written report that goes to a hearing examiner who a week or two later can, for lack of better words, punish that individual that affects his or her parole or other things that they have going on in the facility. It can stifle advancement by that offender because he or she was having a bad day.
And what under that scenario that you explained, where does like the due process aspect come in if they do not see that hearing officer immediately?
Well, first of all, we started a pilot with they agreed to be on that housing unit. We didn't force anyone to be on that housing unit. And we took people from all around the facility and allowed them to participate in the study group and the control group. And we had the staff buy in. I met personally with the unions, did town halls on the housing units before we started it, met with everybody involved, and said, here's where we're going to do this. It went so well that 6 months after we did it, myself and the unit manager went to Washington State to teach them about it because they had heard about it. It was one of the few programs where I got no pushback from the very, very active and large numbered corrections officers union. They just thought it was a good way to handle things effectively, quickly, and not affect that incarcerated adult for the rest of his incarceration.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, I know you spent your career at the State Department of Corrections. I personally know a lot of people who are currently informally incarcerated there, and I know that they have a lot of different privileges and activities that are open to them there. This is a very different population in a county jail, much more transient. Can you please just list maybe 3 or 4 policies or things that are available at the DOC that you would like to see made available or at least piloted at the ACJ?
Well, we've talked about it several times, and I feel like I'm beating a drum here. If we implement unit management in the ACJ, that can usher in progress, because those individuals will not just come from a security background. Some of them will come from a treatment background. They understand that good treatment is good security. Okay, there's been a lot of discussion since COVID about processing of property, processing of mail, processing. The one advantage I believe we had in DOC was we had 24 facilities. We were always communicating with each other. I could, as a warden of a large facility, I could pick up the phone and call a warden across the state in Philly and say, "What are you doing here?" Probably to the disadvantage of this facility. Sorry, they can call another county facility, but there's only 1 or 2 in the whole state that look like this facility, if there's even that many. So there's a networking there that I'm used to that maybe they don't have accessible to them down here. We can work on that. We can network. There's nothing says that we can't have flow between other jurisdictions, meaning federal, state, whatever, with that facility down there, if it's going to better that facility. When I left here the first time, I had scores of people from SCIs around the state asking me to come down here for tours. I mean, when I was here the first time, and when I went back to the SCIs, I was very proud to send lots of folks from all disciplines down to the ACJ to see what they were doing. The ACJ has a history of great programming. I don't know what's going on now. Analytically, the numbers game that goes on in corrections, they were always out in front of all that. Hopefully they still are. I have purposely not researched some of these things out of the fairness to this process, but make no mistake, when I was there the first time, there was a lot of great things happening in that facility. There's no reason why we can't get there again.
I appreciate that. And then yes or no, do you believe that incarcerated workers should be compensated for their work?
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Annie.
All right. Last but not least, nice to speak to you again, of course, Mr. Wingert. I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I've already asked just for, the sake of the public record, mostly centered around like culture and the culture that you hope to implement in the ACJ. Considering the importance of language and its connection to culture, how do you plan to refer to individuals in custody, both when speaking to the staff and to the individuals themselves?
Mr. Smith, Mr. Jones, that's what I'm used to. I'm used to walking someone on their housing unit or in a sidewalk or in a yard. If I'm standing in a yard with 500 inmates, I have no problem talking to someone as Mr. I'm not sure what's happening now. During my career, that changed throughout the years, whether it was informally changed or it was formally changed by a secretary. I don't understand. I mean, I understand why you're asking the question. I don't understand what the problem with that is, though. I'm going to expect people to treat me and speak to me, with respect. I do the same thing. And if that's not happening, people working there will quickly see that's what I expect, and that's how I do it. So I know you have to ask the question. I know we've talked about this. To me, that's part of the cultural change. Like there's got to be a two-way respect here.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. What is your philosophy or approach to the use of force?
Well, it's got to be as minimal as possible, and we better, especially if it's a planned use of force. You've talked about, I think, ad nauseum in these meetings every month about planned versus unplanned use of force. I've listened to that. It seems to me like most of the use of force is based on the reports I've looked at online. Most of the use of forces at the facility are unplanned use of force. I like to get us to the point where we have the ability to talk to people and negotiate and deal with things before it turns into use of force. That's what I'm comfortable with. I'm not saying I was never involved with the use of force. I was involved personally with the use of forces in almost every discipline I had coming up through, whether it was just holding somebody in place until, so-called cavalry got there, or I was in the middle of a use of force situation one time as a superintendent. The aftermath of a use of force, and I'm not just talking about the paperwork involved, I'm talking about the whole, shift that happens in the facility on the shift when there's a lot of use of forces. I will obviously find out what shift they're mostly happening on, have some questions and conversations with the folks running those shifts about why the use of forces seem to be happening on this day on their shift the most. I mean, it's not hard to track when, where, what parts of the facility they're happening in. I would venture to guess a lot of them are happening in intake. I'm aware of that. I'm sure that's where they're happening. So we have to address those areas. There's parts of your facility that you just have to pay more attention to, and you can never take your eye off that ball, ever. Because when you think you have it, you don't have it. So I'm aware of sections of facilities that you need to enhance, the way people know how to talk to people in that area, the way people know how to maybe move out of a situation that's escalating into something that doesn't need to escalate into.
Thank you. And you're absolutely correct. Most of the uses of force are happening in intake, and I look forward to seeing the changes that you bring to the intake process in general. My next question is, what is your plan to reduce the reliance on lockdowns?
I missed that.
So what is your plan to reduce the reliance on lockdowns?
Well, I understand from hearing from the board and some other people that there's a lot of lockdowns at the facility. Now, I haven't quite found out why yet. I've heard different opinions on why there's so many lockdowns. I'm not familiar. I'm not comfortable with a lot of lockdowns. What I'm familiar with is I'm walking around a facility. I'm in charge of that facility, and I got staff telling me, "Hey, boss, you got to lock your facility down. We got something going on in here." So I finally do some research, and I find out analytically that there are some things that we need to secure the facility over. After a few hours, those same staff usually will say, "Okay, enough's enough. We're good, because now we're the ones out delivering the meals. We're the ones delivering the mail. We're the ones transferring laundry around the facility. If you're going to lock a facility down, you better lock the facility down." Meaning you're not just going to bring certain people out to do work that we don't want our staff doing. I'm very familiar with standing in a line and serving food all day when I was an officer, when I was a deputy, when I was a unit manager. I know how that works. I also know walking into those areas as a deputy or superintendent and watching the staff look at me like, "What are we doing here? This has been going on for 16 hours. I know that the toll that people pay for a lot of lockdowns and a lot of long-term lockdowns. What I will do the first time we have to lock that facility down is ask why, and not just, I better not hear it's for security reasons. And B, I will be going pod to pod, door to door, explaining to the people who reside there why we lock down. I have found through my experiences that if you just communicate change in a facility to everybody involved, if you just communicate it, they somewhat can tolerate it or understand it a little bit better. A lot better, actually. So maybe that's happening. I hope it's happening. Again, I hate to keep harking on unit management, but that's a perfect thing that a unit manager would do on his or her housing unit. Go out and explain why we're currently in, the third lockdown of the month or whatever it is. But, to be fair, that's a short-term problem and that's a long-term problem. The long-term, if they're being locked down because we don't have the staff, I need to find out the accuracy of that. And the short-term problem is going into the pods and talking to the people who are affected by that lockdown and getting to understand. If that means taking a corrections officer around with me, door to door, and explaining how lockdowns work, then that's what we do. Hope that
I appreciate that. Yeah, and currently, the only reason that we receive for lockdowns is safety and security with minimal detail. So we look forward to that changing with you being transparent to the board. My next question is related to some of the public comments that we've heard earlier today regarding the $125 a month from the Incarcerated Individuals Welfare Fund. Are you in favor of that program continuing?
I'm not really. familiar with it. I listened to your meetings last month about talking about, I think it's up for some study or a vote pretty soon. I answered the question earlier about people working in prison being compensated. Yes. I don't think there's any issue if the county, has deemed it appropriate to give something to people, incarcerated there. I don't see the negative of that continuing, other than there's obviously there's costs involved, but I'm sure that's had an impact, a positive impact for the people down there.
Well, mine's much brighter than mine have figured out the cost already, and they're actually, they're paying into that program, and they're kind of receiving the money that they're already paying to it. My last question, I'm not sure if you're aware, the first time I was in the ACJ, I'm one of two formerly incarcerated members of the JOB, and the first time I was there as a juvenile. So I'm very, very interested in how you'll be impacting the juveniles who are currently there. I believe there are 20 when we went there yesterday. So I know you talked a little bit about it, after Barbara asked you, but I'm hoping you can elaborate and provide some specific examples of how you'll improve the conditions of the juveniles in the ACJ.
Well, I'm going to have to do a little bit of research on why they're there. I mean, my first time there, they weren't there. I don't believe there was any juveniles there the first time. I know that there's been different shifts with programs changing, or other places that they could go aren't no longer in existence. So I have to find out why they're there and if there's any alternatives. As I mentioned early on, it's really a challenge to have that population inside any prison. So, I got to find out, hopefully they're in programming from the time they get up till the time they go to sleep. They better be in some kind of education, some kind of programming, something that's going to make their days go a lot better. I mean, and everybody in this room can visualize what it must be like, to be 16, 17 in a prison that's mostly made up of adults. I don't want to think about that. I have children. I don't want to think about that. However, if that's the case, and other entities have deemed that that's the case, then we got to do the best we can for those folks. I mean, if we can't do that, what are we doing here for those folks? I mean, honestly, if we can't do that, I mean, the fact that we at one point had to open up an entire prison in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania dedicated to that population is a head scratcher, but we had to. And it's changed missions over time due to different law changes. But we have to, if we can't do right by those individuals, what are we doing? What are we doing to the rest of the individuals in the institution? I'm very familiar with, I've worked with people in their 30s and 40s and 50s who came to prison when they were 14. I know those people. I've had years of relationships with those people, so they've told me what we could have did better for them when they were 14. Obviously, not bringing them there in the first place is what their answers usually are, but just the fact, basic needs, understanding, having staff on those units, a unit manager, sorry, I had to say it again, who understands the needs of those folks versus the needs of a 45-year-old. Everyone in this room has to understand that there's a huge difference there. So you have to have people working with that population who understands that. You got to do that, or you'll make no inroads to help them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, done?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to confirm the county executive's appointment of Trevor Wingard as the ACJ warden?
Motion to appoint.
Do I have a second? Second. Discussion.
I can start that.
Okay, Ms. Griffin.
Just very briefly, when the nomination was announced, I don't have any questions. It did seem to come on very quickly, but we also very quickly got information from Poly-Hire about the process. We had many opportunities over the last few days to talk with the candidate. and so as did members of the community, some who are in this room, and ultimately I feel comfortable that we have enough information, and I appreciate the time that you've given us over the past few days.
I would just, I feel like mine isn't working. Yeah, it's on. I would echo Barb's comments regarding Mr. Wingard's accessibility. I think he is obviously qualified, and I'm very optimistic, very, very optimistic, given everything that I have heard and seen, and I think he would be an outstanding warden.
Sheriff Kraus, nobody has to say anything.
No, I would just echo that, yeah, there was, I think, process. I think we can all say we could have done a better job through that process, especially the public getting more involved at different times. But I will say, since, was it Monday when we had our first meeting, the executive's office set up 4 or 5 Zoom calls so that people on this board felt more comfortable, got more time to talk to the nominee. And I feel comfortable, answering your questions today. I'm glad that you met with the public. It was just a little rushed based on timing of people leaving the jail, the acting warden was leaving, and I think we all can agree that hopefully we don't have to do this process for a very long time and you're very successful in your job. But I think this is, a major appointment that, this is the exec's first major appointment. And I think, working this week out showed that we can get to a confident point in voting for you. I think there were some missteps at the beginning. I think we all agree to that. But I think moving forward, you being available for all of us gives me a great comfort level throughout this week. And you answering the questions for the last hour, I think shows that you know what you're going to be doing down there. You have a lot of priorities. You have a lot of great initiatives that I think we're all excited to see. And I think the biggest thing for all of us, especially for me being on this board for a few years, the transparency. That's something that we had not heard in a very long time. So thank you for your willingness to do this. Thank the executive and her team for kind of crash coursing this over the last couple of days as well. So thank you.
Mr. Wingard, I just want to thank you so much for going through this process and for putting your name in the hat and for coming along with us and just being available and presenting multiple times to the Jail Oversight Board as well as the community. I also want to take a moment to thank the community, so people who filled out the survey that Polly Heyer put out, those who sat in interviews with Polly Heyer, all of you lending your voice to what you want to see out of a next warden at the Allegheny County Jail. All of that was incorporated in the decision-making process. So your voices were heard and were considered at every point of this process. And I just want to thank you for lending your voice and your experience and your opinions to what you want to see out of leadership at the Allegheny County Jail.
I want to thank you, Mr. Wingard, for all the time you spent with us. I think you have excellent credentials, experience, qualifications. I love everything that you've said, basically, and I really look forward to 2025 being a turnaround for all of us, and I look forward to working with you.
I will keep it short because I think everyone already said most of the things that I wanted to say. But I did a lot of research over the past year. What is the function of a jail oversight board? There's not a lot of similar boards throughout the country, and there's not a lot of positive models. In fact, I talked to one person who professed to be an expert, and they said that Allegheny County Jails was actually a model for other places, and I was shocked, and I can't believe that. I couldn't believe it, but one thing we are is transparent, and we're improving that transparency. And part of that is we need to be honest about where we can improve. And this process with respect to the board, we had never heard of Mr. Wingard until Friday at 5 p.m. as far as this board was concerned. So it wasn't particularly transparent, the process, or inclusive of the board. But ultimately, we have an amazing candidate, and the administration, to its credit, did worked with Mr. Wingard, met with us basically every waking hour for the past week. When I saw the resume, my first instinct was, we don't want the status quo. I think Sam Schmidt, had some eloquent things to say, and better than I can say it. The status quo is not acceptable to me. I don't think it's acceptable to this board. There's so many opportunities for improvement, and we have the talent and the energy and the commitment to do so. And you're not that. I believe that you have a vision for really listening to the community and collaborating. And one of the things that we don't always hear is a lot of humility, from our leaders of our institutions, and I think you have that too. And I think that's a necessary ingredient for really being successful in this position. I think Judge Ivashvik said, I love everything about what you've told us. I agree. I think everything you've said, we share the same commitment, the same mission. And I'm really excited for this opportunity. I think you're going to be wildly successful, and I'm still kind of shocked that you wanted the job. So we're glad that you applied. Thank you.
My turn?
Yep.
Thanks. Okay, so I am the only member of the Jail Oversight Board who served in an official capacity on the Warden Search Committee. I was approached in mid-May of last year and asked if that'd be something I'd be interested in serving on. I mean, obviously, yes, I would love to be part of the process to help shape and choose our next warden of the jail. I was told that if I participated in the Warden Search Committee that I would have to recuse myself from the vote for the warden. So even though for the reasons I'm about to go into, I disagree that there was any conflict of interest, that I should have to do that. My word is my word. It's something that means a lot to me, so I will be abstaining from the vote tonight for the warden. I want to talk a little bit just about what that Warden Search Committee looked like. I know almost every member of this board has talked about just disappointment with the process, and I feel the same way. I have, I'm sure if I had to look for things to criticize you for, Mr. Wingard, I would, I could find a couple little ones that we've talked about already, right? Nothing major that I think is worthy of even noting in this meeting, all things that we've talked about in other settings. But something that I do think is really important that we talk about and that the full board knows about, as well as members of the public, people at the jail, anyone who cares about this, should know just how it felt to think that you were going to be part of this really important process, arguably the most important decision I'm ever going to make as a jail oversight board member or even as a county council member. And so when I was asked to be on the board, really excited. I do not regret being on the search committee. It was really helpful to be able to see what a process like that looked like from the inside out, from start to finish. I agreed to recuse from this vote, and a couple days later we were having our first meeting of the Warden Search Committee. That was held on May 29th. That was shortly after Polly Heyer was retained. They won the RFP. They were retained to be the search committee. About a month later, on June 27th, so that first meeting, May 29th, that was the full Warden Search Committee. It was a virtual meeting. We were all seeing each other for the first time. We had just found out who else was going to be on that committee, just excited to it. I had expressed my concern, both publicly and internally, about who was selected for that committee. It felt very heavy with administrative influence, where I was really looking for more non-traditional outside perspective on that committee, but I figured if no one was going to do it, I was going to do it. So about a month later, we had our first one-on-one where the Polly Heyer person reached out to each of us to find out when we could schedule one-on-ones. Mine was on June 27th. I had a nice conversation with Kenyatta, who I think you all remember came to this meeting to present to us. And basically he wanted to know, what did I want to see in a warden? We went over that generally in the May 29th meeting, but in our one-on-one we got to go a little bit more in depth in that. I got to tell him some things that maybe I didn't want the rest of the search committee to know that I was looking for. I got to give him community organizations and activists, people both who come to these meetings, again, some of whom are here tonight, and other stakeholders that I thought it was really important that he talked to in order to make sure that we had the best criteria for the candidate that we would eventually receive. That meeting was great. Super friendly guy, super helpful. He knew his stuff. On July 17th, which was just a couple weeks later, the Warden Search Committee, we received a recruitment update by a member of the county executive staff who also happened to be on that Warden Search Committee, just letting us know the kind of outreach that had started. Appreciated that. Really, at that point, I thought that was going to be what was going to happen, right? That we were going to get regular updates from Polyhire, from the administration, letting us as the Warden Search Committee know how everything was going. That didn't happen. At the August JOB meeting, Kenyatta came from Polyhire to give a presentation to the board. And again, at that point, I hadn't heard anything from him since my one-on-one in June. Come October, I was like, thought I would have heard an update by now. So I started repeatedly emailing him, reaching out, talking to different members of the executive's administration, just trying to find out what's the update. It's October. We started this in May. What is going on? Finally, I heard back from Kenyatta in end of November. We ended up connecting on December 10th for a phone call. So now from June 27th to December 10th, there was no communication with the Warden Search Committee. That December 10th meeting only happened because I was so obnoxious about trying to get a meeting, just to find out any update at all. So then after that conversation with him, and he said he had a meeting with the administration later that week, that's very shortly after that, I'm starting to get anxious. I now know that, Dady's gone, Beesam's about to leave at that point. We know his date, and I'm getting nervous, like, where are the finalists? I had imagined being on the Warden Search Committee would mean that I was participating in the narrowing down of all of the applicants, the determining the metrics by which each candidate would be judged by. I just thought I would feel more included in that process. I took the community survey that I assume many of you took, that was put online for the public in August, and I felt like at that point I had participated almost as much as any member of the public could have done, as any member of the Jail Oversight Board could have done, and yet I was the only one who was going to have to recuse myself from this vote tonight. And I got really frustrated. Suddenly, as others have mentioned, we heard that there was a Warden Search Committee meeting. Again, at this time, this was our second ever full Warden Search Committee meeting, happened on December 20th. We got together. It was the first time I was ever in the room with the rest of the Warden Search Committee. And we were presented 2 finalists. We also received a couple anonymized profiles of a couple other candidates who were not being presented to us. So by the time I actually heard anything about any candidates or even what they would look like, it was already narrowed down to 2. I will say that is probably one of my biggest frustrations of this process, is that I felt like I didn't get to help narrow it down. I didn't get to even view anonymized candidate profiles as those candidates applied and came in. And we were presented Mr. Wingard and another candidate. It was, to be honest, very clear that Mr. Wingard was the better of the 2 candidates. We were not asked to vote on one candidate or the other, but instead to answer a series of questions, and at the end to ask if we would be comfortable with this person being the warden of the jail. I will say for that I answered yes for you, Mr. Wingard. I am comfortable with you being the warden. I think you are very qualified. I think your resume is really impressive. I crept on you as hard as I could in your past places of employment, on the little social media I could find of you. I even tried to find your family's social media. Man, I tried everywhere, and it was very, very hard to find anything to use against you in an argument against supporting you. So I do want to say I really do appreciate you. Also wonder why you would want this job, but I'm happy that we have someone like you who is willing to do it. So after that Warden Search Committee meeting, again, found out there was the 2 finalists. And then holidays came, and Friday night before our January 6th meeting with the full Jail Oversight Board and Warden Search Committee, only at that point was any information shared with the rest of the Jail Oversight Board. I mean, I literally had to sit there and keep a secret from my boyfriend that I live with, right, about all the information I had. It was very clearly marked confidential, and I gave my word I would not share that out. So we got that information Friday at 5 p.m. and then by Monday we were all meeting Mr. Wingard for the first time. Well, my second time, but for the first time for everyone else. And I will say, over the past few days since that Monday meeting, Mr. Wingard, the county administration, everyone involved has been very willing to share everything that was asked of us, to meet with us. I think we probably talked like 3, 4, 5 times just since that first time that we've met, both in person and in a virtual setting. And so I do appreciate that, but I felt like the timeline was so short, so rushed. I also understand the challenges of Interim Warden Dady leaving, of Interim Warden Beeson getting his new job, which I'm really happy for that, man. I think you're hilarious. I think you've been very fair and honest with us in your short time as Interim Warden and in all your years as Chief Deputy and Deputy Warden. I am very thankful for you, and if I don't get another chance in this meeting to say that, yeah, I'm really gonna miss you, dude, like a lot. So thank you for everything. But yeah, so I am abstaining, so I don't really have anything else to say, but I just wanted to make the process really clear without violating any confidentiality. I wanted folks to know what my participation was in full transparency and my disappointment with the process, not the candidate. So, thank you.
Manny.
All right. So I'm going to speak primarily to members of the public, only because, you know, we've been speaking all week. But also, I want all of us to be reminded of the incarcerated individuals, the folks who are there. Close to 2,000 people, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, who eventually will get these meeting minutes and see. Even though, of course, we're talking about your position, we're talking about, you know, different ways that you may impact the culture. My personal focus is how you're going to impact the incarcerated individuals, tens of thousands over his tenure. So that's who I'm going to be thinking about as I speak. There was an article by Julia Zankovich, who is back there right now, where I was quoted as saying, quote, as far as wardens go, he seemed to be pretty progressive. And I stand by that. Right? He presented us, you know, with a focus on population reduction, reentry, education and vocational programs, and community involvement, all initiatives that I support and all of which have come up today. Most importantly, he is committed to transparency and accountability to not just the board, but to the community at large. And you actually said, I think today in this meeting, constant communication and a shared vision is going to be the focus on, you know, how you engage the community and the Jail Oversight Board. And to echo what Bethany said, my only issue with today's proceedings is the process that got us here. I shared a position that was eloquently expressed by Sam Schmidt earlier. This was not a collaborative process and an informative process the way that it could have been and the way that I wish it would have been. And I'm not somebody who likes to toot my own horn, but I've been around for a while. You know what I'm saying? I've been engaged in many different aspects of this work. And of course, Bethany Hallam's time on the board predates all of us. So I think there's a lot of expertise on the board, which Rob already mentioned, that was not engaged and that was not utilized in a way that it should have been. And that's not to take away from the community members who did provide their input. Of course, I respect and appreciate y'all. But the thing that I don't appreciate is Polly Hire's claim that they engaged with and got feedback from the Jail Oversight Board and One Hood, which, surprise, surprise, I'm a part of both. And I say with certainty, even though I did see, and to be fair, I did see an email that was sent that ended up in the spam folder of a One Hood employee. They were not engaged and they were not spoken to. Yet, when Polly Hire put their memo out, they listed One Hood as an entity that they engaged with. And, you know, I take offense to that. Even though the search for the warden began in May of last year, the first time I and many other members of the board was informed about anything was last week. And even though throughout the week, Mr. Wingard has made himself available to the board, and as you know, we've had several meaningful discussions, enough that I have no doubt you will be confirmed as the next warden. Of course, you are qualified, and I do believe that you'll bring positive changes to the jail. All right. But it is important for me to note that the process of selecting the JOB liaison was way more thorough and collaborative than this process, which I think is something that is a little bit more important, a little bit more impactful. You, as the leader of the jail, as the head of the jail, are going to set the culture for the entire jail. You know what I mean? So I think I would have liked to have seen a process that was more collaborative, meaning everybody on the board having input, everybody on the board being informed about, you know, the process every step of the way. Nevertheless, here we are. I think Sam Smith said it better than I will. And I know you've been watching old jail oversight board meetings, so maybe you saw the one in September of 2023 when Warden Harper, was given his farewell. If so, you would have heard me say that I don't think there's any good way for anyone to function as a part of an oppressive system. I also said, as we think about Harper's replacement, I want to remind my comrades that there's no such thing as a good warden, and there's no such thing as a good jail, and I reiterate those sentiments today. Thank you.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Griffin?
Yes.
Judge Bigley?
Yes.
Sheriff Kraus?
Yes.
Controller O'Connor?
Yes.
County Executive Innamorato?
Yes.
The President Judge of Asheville votes yes. Mr. Perkins?
Yes.
Ms. Hallam?
I abstain, but I really do hope that everything that you said you're going to do, you end up doing.
Manning?
No.
Motion carries. Congratulations. We're happy to have you.
Can you pronounce your name for the record? I know some people are saying Wingard. I'm pretty sure you told me it was Wingard, just for the people in the room who are going to have to say it a lot. Wingard, not Wingard. Pittsburgh. Wingard? All right. Just want everybody to know.
I'll get it wrong for another 6 months. Please accept my apologies in advance. I do want to say to Mr. Beeson, you always have been one of my favorites. You are so easy to talk to, so forthcoming. You do a fabulous job, and I'm really, really sorry you're leaving. I really am.
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah,
Okay,
you've done an outstanding job. You really have.
No old business. To the community corrections reports and the warden's report and the deputy warden's reports. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, motion to defer those discussions for today's meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion to, we have a motion to approve the IIWF monthly disbursements of $125 for the fiscal year 2025. Do I have a motion? Does anybody move?
I motion to consider.
I'm sorry.
Motion to bring it up.
Yeah, and I'm going to second that. And then now that we have a motion and a second, I'd like to introduce an amendment to it. Okay. So originally, we have been trying for months now to discuss the IIWF disbursements for the rest of the year, just so we don't have to do this every month, so that the disbursements aren't delayed. Because of the warden vote that we were not expecting for this month, we are actually going to push that full long-term 125 disbursement to next month. And so I would like to amend this motion to just approve the 125 for the month of January, and I would ask for a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed to, for the modification? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so we have a discussion. Sorry. Any discussion on the motion?
No.
Okay, I'm just going to say that I am voting against the motion, and it is not because I do not believe that those funds should be utilized for the incarcerated population of Allegheny County Jail. They must be so utilized, but the fund is going to be bankrupt in a year and a half, and I think that there's been no study, no input, no anything on the best use of this money to benefit the inmate population. Ms. Griffin.
I'm sorry, the motion is to approve it for one more month. Okay. Yes.
Judge Bigley. No. Mr. Kraus.
No.
We're voting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to say
something.
I apologize. Go ahead.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, President Judge, and I apologize for interjecting. But I do want to let the public know that, we are working on constructing a study in partnership with Department of Human Services so that we can better understand the impacts of this 125 distribution. This is a fund that should benefit the residents of the ACJ, and it is limited in the amount of money that exists, and the amount of money going in will be limited in the future as positive changes come where we can't collect as many fines and fees on the utilization of telecommunication objects within the ACJ. So, we do have to consider how we're using this money, and also, we need to make sure that we're making a data-informed decision. So we are working on gathering that information, and we'll be bringing that proposal next month to the board for consideration.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Do you want to change your vote, Ms. Griffin? No. Okay. Judge Bigley? Sheriff Kraus? You didn't vote yet. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. County Executive?
I vote yes.
I vote no.
Yes.
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 Motion carries. Do I have a motion to approve the job liaison duties and responsibilities?
Judge Evashvik, there is another motion on here before that, if I could just address that.
sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So I put a motion on the agenda. At a visit a couple weeks ago, the incarcerated individuals who were working in the kitchen had expressed a desire for drinking water. They're currently having to drink out of the spigot, and they were just like, we're here for long hours every single day of our lives. Can we please get some drinking water? I'm used to having to put little things like that on the agenda, but thankfully, thanks to some suggestions from my colleagues, I reached out to the jail and they agreed to put drinking water in the kitchen for the incarcerated workers to drink without us having to vote on it. I also just kind of wanted to see how Yans would all vote on letting people have water, but we don't have to vote on it because it happened anyway. So thank you all for those suggestions, and I will personally withdraw the motion for drinking water because it's already there.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hallam. Do I have a motion to approve the liaison duties and responsibilities?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we will go, well, do you want an opportunity to ask questions of jail administration? We're waiving the reports.
Not today. It's nothing that can't wait till next week. We've connected about some other things. The one thing I do want to talk about is this meeting being moved. So it is very clear in our bylaws that the meeting date is the first Thursday of every month unless voted on by a majority of the Jail Oversight Board. There was no vote at all for this month. We were just told that the meeting was moved to this day. I don't know if there was any social media communication or anything with the members of the public who come to these meetings consistently on the first Thursday of the month, but I guess I just wanted to ask who made that decision to move the meeting and why did it go against our bylaws?
A request was made to move the meeting due to the holiday being the day before the originally scheduled meeting, but I think more primarily because we wanted to vote on the confirmation of the warden, and if we had done it last Thursday, nobody would have had the opportunity to learn anything about him.
A request by the administration?
Yes.
Okay, why did we at least not follow the process? I don't think any of us would have voted against that move, but it is very clearly in our bylaws that we have to vote to move the day from the first Thursday.
Well, since I'm the chair, I will take responsibility for not doing that.
And just won't do it again.
Call it a vacation oversight, and it won't happen again.
Thank you very much, Judge.
apologize.
No, I appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Judge.
We could just do it via email,
Yes, yeah, I didn't even think about it, to be honest with you, so I'm sorry. We can't do it. Okay, no, okay, thank you. Okay, so moving back to public comments, Todd McCullum.
It's very hot. It's always very cold in here.
It is.
Be very brief since meeting getting long in the tooth. January 9th is the day of National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. I acknowledge, by extension, the work that the jail guards and the staff do. And I just wanted to express that appreciation to those, Warden and your staff, for the appreciation and their role in law enforcement. And this is their day. And I would appreciate extending them good health and continued safe work. Likewise, Sheriff, to the men and women of your department, to the men and women of the Allegheny County Police Department, the dwindling number of the City of Pittsburgh Police Department, the other municipal and state law enforcement officers. Again, Municipal Law Enforcement Officer Appreciation Day. Continue good health and safety. Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. Oh, Aiden Setlock. I'm sorry, I can't read that last name. I'm sure I got it wrong.
All right. So my name is Aiden Setlock. That actually was correct. I'm a senior legal studies major at Point Park. About a month ago, I finished my capstone project on the critical shortage of mental health resources within the ACJ. But today I want to talk to you about another pressing issue. It's the serious lack of transparency within this facility's administration. This issue is not new. I mean, the very existence of this board is rooted in a lack of the jail's accountability and transparency. Time and time again, we've seen efforts to obscure critical information the public has a right to know. My recent experiences requesting records is just the latest example of this troubling matter. Since October, I've been requesting records. These are related to inmate fatalities, including mortality reviews. These reviews address critical questions, and even as the acting warden acknowledged in his affidavit, they address issues such as the medical response, early intervention, cause of death, and improvement in patient care. These are fundamental questions of accountability and public safety. Yet, despite the jail's precedent of publishing redacted NCCHC mortality reviews, the administration refuses to produce these records, even in a similar redacted format. This contradiction raises very serious concerns. If the NCCHC reports can be redacted to comply with HIPAA and safety standards, why can't the same be done here? What is it the administration is failing to disclose? The public has a right to transparency, especially in light of the troubling number of fatalities we see in this jail every year, which demonstrates the urgent need for public oversight to evaluate whether these changes are actually being implemented and to prevent these further tragedies from occurring. Without access to updated mortality reviews, the public cannot hold this facility accountable or assess whether it is meeting its obligation to our incarcerated friends and family. Not only does the jail's refusal to provide these records violate the spirit of accountability and transparency, they violate existing legal doctrine. Legally, the jail's refusal to release these records is a clear violation of Pennsylvania's right to know law, specifically Section 706, which mandates that these agencies redact non-disclosable portions of records rather than withhold them entirely. And courts have consistently ruled that when records contain both public and private information, agencies such as the jail are required to release the public portions with appropriate redactions. Additionally, the jail's claim that these records are too sensitive to release contradicts its own previous actions. The NCCHC reports, which are available on the county's website, serve a similar purpose, proving that transparency can coexist with privacy protections. This inconsistency only deepens suspicions about what these withhold documents might reveal. To the board, I urge you to demand transparency and accountability from this administration. Is your response? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Judge, can you tell me what information you need for 125? Like, or at least take it less and be cool with like